Hey guys, this is PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Checking Her Out at the Library by Combustible Battering. The summary is: Stephanie Brown wants to find some new books to check out. Cassandra Cain finds something else to check out. Maps helps. Babs tries. Alright, and without further ado, let's hop right in. Stephanie Brown approached the return desk at the Gotham Public Library with a stack full of romance novels and a defeated expression. I don't get it, Babs. I used to love stuff like this, and now I can't pay attention for more than a few chapters. Babs was just happy to see Steph coming back to the library. She had once been an avid reader, and Babs always enjoyed chatting with her. But a few years back, her weekly visits became monthly, and then she stopped coming altogether. Barbara didn't want to pry, would never bring it up herself. But she had seen Arthur Brown on the news and could make some guesses as to what had clouded that blonde ray of sunshine. But recently, it seemed like the clouds were beginning to part, and she wanted to help Steph rediscover her love of reading. Barbara set the books to the side. She'd get her intern to deal with those later, and shrugged. Tastes change, Steph. Maybe you need to try something new, see if something else holds your attention. Why don't you tell me some things you might be interested in these days, and I can recommend something else. After a while, Babs had a fresh list of titles written on a piece of scrap paper, and she signaled someone over Steph's shoulder. The library mascot, affectionate, and intern, Mia Mizugachi, also known as Maps. Maps was a student at the local Gotham Academy and practically lived at the library, to the point that Babs used to joke about how she might as well work there. And then slowly, that stopped being a joke, although her title of intern was a name only, as she was technically too young to be officially employed. She just enjoyed being around books, and Barbara enjoyed the visible joy being around books brought her. So Babs started letting her help out when Maps offered. She loved processing returns to see what people had been reading, and she loved talking up her current favorite books to anyone who would listen while reshelving books. Stephanie let Maps guide her around the library to get the list of books Babs recommended. More than once on the adventure, Steph felt a shiver run down her spine. She could swear that someone was watching her, but every time she glanced around, it was just her and Maps on whatever row they were on. She shrugged it off. There were other people browsing after all. Surely she was just being paranoid. Steph went home with a new stack of books and a renewed determination to enjoy them. Cassie, come out wherever you are. It's time to close up, Maps called for her friend. No one was really sure when Cassandra Cain first showed up to the library. It's possible no one would ever have known that she was there, if not for Maps' habit of sketching out each and every little corner of the library when she was restless. One night after closing, Maps had found Cass sleeping near the newspaper section after noticing it looked the slightest bit different than how it looked when she had left off her latest sketch, with the picture torn out and torn up around Cass's sleeping form, and the David Cain underwear it had been in the paper. Maps tried to keep it a secret for Cass, but sometimes she let things slip when she got too excited. It only took a day and a half before Babs had been made aware and taken the girl in to live with her in her apartment. She even pretended not to notice how often Cass would slip out and spend the night in the library anyway. Cass didn't really speak at first, but she and Maps had become fast friends. Maps had noticed she was more comfortable communicating with gestures, so she took it upon herself to teach Cass sign language so she could communicate more effectively. And eventually, Babs and Maps had taught her how to read as well. It wasn't really a secret now that Cassie hung out at the library as much as Maps, but she tended to hide away from everyone as much as Maps sought them out. Cass seemed to emerge from a shadow with one of the books Maps had reshelved from Cass's return after she left. Holy crap, Cass, how did you do that? Maps didn't say anything about the book, but caught Cass blushing a bit, before handing it over and walking away in a hurry. Maps shrugged and put the book back for a second time that day. The next week, Stephanie Brown came back to the return desk and set her books down. Any luck? Babs asked, even though she could see it in Stephanie's face. I don't know, Stephanie scowled. I liked these better, I suppose, but something's still missing. The action was good, but the romance plot in there just didn't do anything for me. The dudes all seemed kind of lame and samey, you know? And she made a gesture with her hands. You want to try again? I still have some more ideas, Babs offered. Steph grinned and lightly pounded her hand on the desk. Hit me again, barkeep. Barbara smiled. Okay, but you better not have to operate any heavy machinery tonight, Babs joked as she scrawled a new list of titles and handed it off to Maps. Maps walked off alone as Steph let out a genuine laugh at Babs' corny joke. And Maps felt her affection for the blonde girl grow just a little. Before Maps got to the last book on the list, Cass popped up in the path holding a book. For her, trust me. Cass nearly whispered, looking down at her shoes. You mean Stephanie? Maps asked after nearly having a heart attack. And also, you have to stop doing that. Or teach me how. Either is fine. She eyed her for another second and glanced back in the direction she had come from, then figured one book wouldn't hurt. What the heck, I'll slip it in. Cass was nowhere in sight when Maps looked back up, but she could swear she heard a whispered, Stephanie, in the distance. The next week, Steph bounced up to the desk. Babs smiled to herself. Another satisfied customer, Gordon. Job well done. I knew I'd get you with the sci-fi stuff. Which one was your favorite? Steph laid down the book and eagerly pointed at one of them. One Babs couldn't quite place. Babs, there were lesbians in space. There were space lesbians. They were so cool. Babs nodded along, a little confused as Steph continued to excitedly talk about her new favorite book. She didn't remember that one being on the list, but as she was thinking about it, Babs was distracted by the sight of a beaming smile from the library's less sociable mascot as she darted back around a shelf out of sight. Oh well, Babs thought. At least Steph seems to have found her spark. But I wonder what has Cass in such a good mood. As Cass tried to escape further notice, she crashed right into Maps, who had witnessed what had just happened. Cass looked at her, eyes wide, but still not able to shed her grin. She held a finger to her mouth and practically dragged Maps deeper into the library where they wouldn't be overheard. Oh my crap! Maps explained in a whisper shout. Shh, Cass whispered. You like her, Maps said, not a question, not teasingly, just matter-of-factly. Cass nodded, her posture changed, and her expression now a complete 180 from the easy smile she had just been wearing. What do I do? Maps thought for a second. Well, what do you want to do? Cass looked thoughtful and said, More books. I want her to read more books I pick out. I can tell that she will like them, and she looked away trying to find the words. It makes me happy that she liked what I picked out. Why don't you give me your own list of recs for Steph this time, and I'll check her out myself. Maps offered. Cass immediately started listing books, so many that Maps knew she had missed some as she tried to keep up. She'd never heard Cass talk so much or so fast before. Then she went up to the front desk and pocketed the list Babs gave her, and went to work collecting Cass's list instead. Maps wanted to do more for her friend, though. She just wasn't sure how. She was sure Cass would want to talk to Stephanie, and she wanted to see that smile on her friend's face again. And she started to like Stephanie as well. How could she get Steph to notice a girl she didn't know existed, and who was so good at not being seen? How could she get Cass out of her comfort zone long enough for an introduction without completely stressing her out and making her bolt? Maps thought about what would root Cass in place long enough to make a chance meeting seem natural, and suddenly she had a plan. Maps was unstoppable with a plan. The next week they would be getting in the sequel to the first book Cass recommended to Steph, and Maps realized she could count on a new book day for Cass to let her guard down just enough. She knew Cass would probably read the book 2 or 3 times straight on the day they got it in, and would be too distracted to keep up her usual hide-and-seek routine. And Maps also volunteered to work the return desk when she knew Steph would usually stop by. She could make this work. Sure enough, Steph walked in the door as giddy as Maps had seen her. She laid the books on the counter and smiled. I loved them all. Where's Babs? I need more. Feed me. Maps got up with the new list she had gotten from Cass and began walking Steph around the library, but instead of getting the books for Steph, she seemed to be leading her around aimlessly. They went back and forth across the library multiple times, though parts of the library Steph had never even seen. Maps was getting antsy, which was unusual. She had checked and double-checked most of Cass's favorite spots. Finally, Maps gingerly led Steph up a set of stairs Steph had never noticed before and into an employee-only area, clearly trying not to make any noise, which was another odd thing Steph noticed. I mean, why the secrecy? Maps basically is an employee, and me and Babs are practically besties. Steph also knew that Maps knew where every book was located with her eyes closed, and she clearly wasn't looking for books anymore. But before she could ask her what was up, she bumped into a younger girl in a dank corner, a poorly lit hallway extending the length of the second floor of the library. When she saw why Maps had stopped, her breath had caught in her throat. A girl was curled up on the floor at the end of the hall, lost in a book that Steph recognized even at the distance as book 2 of her recent favorite. The girl hadn't noticed Steph and Maps skulking up to her yet, her attention completely on the book. 2 things occurred to Steph very suddenly, and she froze in place. The first was that despite the prevalence of lesbians and all manners of relationships in the sci-fi and fantasy books she had been devouring the last couple of weeks, She had never thought of herself as anything other than straight. Not that she was particularly attached to the identity, it just wasn't something she had interrogated. She had only really dated Tim after all. She was a girl and she had liked a boy. It had just not yet occurred to her that she might also like people who weren't boys. Well, whatever. She would have to sort that out later, because the second thing that occurred to her was that the girl she was now staring a hole into was really cute. The third thing occurred to her too late, and that was that she was still holding the breath that had caught in her throat, and she exhaled all at once. The dark-haired girl looked up suddenly, an expression like she had been caught in a trap. Eyes darting from Maps to Steph and back again. Steph felt a blush creeping into her cheeks, and they were making eye contact now, and the dark-haired girl arched an eyebrow and, oh crap, can she read minds? Steph thought as the girl on the floor seemed to peer right into her soul. Oh no, she can read minds. She knows for sure. I just thought she was cute. Steph cleared her throat to try to calm down. It feels like so much time is passing. How much time has passed? I bet a non-normal amount of time has passed. And deep breath. Stop staring, Steph. Do something now. Do literally anything, Steph. Maps watched the two girls stare at each other for a completely normal amount of time, probably. She knew Cass was good at reading body language, but it didn't take the world's greatest detective, or someone trained to read body language, or even a second-rate Riddler's knockoff daughter, surely, to decipher the looks that passed between the both of them. Maps was ready to quietly pat herself on the back for her handiwork, but then realized that they hadn't actually said a word to each other. Ahem, Maps choked out. Stephanie, this is my friend Cassandra. Cass actually recommended some of the books you've been reading. Cass, this is Stephanie Brown. Maps didn't mean to call out Steph like that, but excitement got the better of her. She hoped Steph wouldn't think too much about the implications of that, or hold it against either of them. A couple of details definitely clicked into place for Steph, and some new questions with that new information, but she recovered quickly and decided to file that away for later. Cass obviously wasn't able to read her mind, or well, if she could, she wasn't at the moment, because she was too busy trying to crawl inside her book and hide. Steph thought about the main characters of her new obsession and decided it was time to stop thinking and do. Things only happened if you stop thinking and do. Only bad things happen when you're thinking while you should be doing. Hi. Yeah, real smooth, Steph. Oh my god, is that the second one? I loved the first book. I can't wait to read that when you're done. But, no rush, Stephanie exclaimed as she plopped down beside Cass. Can we talk about the first one? Do you mind? Cass lowered the book, but no words would come out of her mouth. Now? Is this happening right now? Not ready for this. Need to train more. Need to plan. I've only read 3 sappy romance novels Steph had returned. Don't know how to do this yet. She continued to blink at Stephanie, then she just covered her face with her book again to hide her blush. And Stephanie almost stood up. I'm so sorry, that was rude. I don't want to interrupt. I just got excited and... Real cool, Steph. Scare her off already. This is what happens when you try to be brave. You always... Oh no. Cass didn't want her to go. Frankly, she didn't want either of them to leave this spot ever again. Cassandra had been trained for most of her life as a weapon that would read intent in her opponents and react without needing to think. It had taken a long time to start to deprogram that instinct, and now sometimes she found herself with the opposite problem. Unable to stay out of her own head, endlessly thinking and second-guessing when she used to just be able to act. This wasn't a fight, but maybe she could still be read and react Cass. Cass took a deep breath. Her heart fluttered when she finally let herself see Steph. She looked disappointed, but now Cass could see it mostly at herself, and then snapped her into reality instantly. Steph was starting to rise, but she clearly didn't want to go. She wanted to be here, with Cass. She wanted to be here with Cass, and all Cass had to do was open her mouth and say something. No, it's fine. Cass managed to squeak out as she reached for Stephanie's sleeve before she could get to her feet. I've, already read it twice, she said shyly. Cass shot Maps a quick, pointed look, but then softened and signed a quick thank you. With her hands and Steph settled back down beside her, both girls trying not to look as relieved as they clearly felt. Eyes sparkling now as they started to discuss their favorite books in detail. As Maps walked away to give them some privacy, she saw that Babs had been watching as well from a distance, a triumphant grin on her face. You know, I can't help but feel I deserve some credit for this development, since that was one of my recommendations. Maps had to look away while she rolled her eyes, but she smiled to herself. She knew that Cass had taken the first step for herself, even if Maps literally brought them to each other and basically forced them to meet face to face. She was proud of her friend for knowing she wanted something for herself and reaching out for it. She knew that kind of thing was hard for Cass. She couldn't help but smile back at Babs too, though. She let her have this one. Babs really did care about her kids, and she does run this place. Alright guys, and that is the end of checking her out at the library by combustible battering. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.